Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another episode of Learn to Play Games. My name is Lance, and today we're going to take a look at Endure the Stars. This is a brand new game that was put out by Grimlord Games. It is a 1 to 6 player fully cooperative action survival game. It takes roughly a half an hour to 2 hours to play, depending upon the mission you've chosen to go on. And there's two different ways to play. You can play it where you just select a single mission, or there are campaigns that will chain a number of missions together, and they will tell an overall story arc. On top of that, when playing in the campaign mode, the survivors will not heal back up to their full health, regain all of their resolve, and heal any injuries that they have from one game to another. They have to go to an in-between game section called the refuge, which is a really neat design, and that will let them potentially heal up over a number of turns in the refuge before they go on to their next mission. And there's also consequences that happen in that, so it's not all good or that they'll be able to heal all the way back up to their things. There's other bad things, and even some of the survivors could potentially die while in that state. So the game itself is based on the fact that you are playing as survivors in a spaceship that is sent out to colonize different planets. And in order to do that, it has help from these genetically engineered creatures that have broken loose. Instead of helping the crew, they have destroyed and killed most of the crew. And so you are the survivors that are left, and you're trying to accomplish certain goals or different things on board the ship to stay alive. So my impressions of the game so far have been pretty good. I've enjoyed the game quite a bit so far. I've gotten to play a number of the missions already, and I've been able to take it over and try it out with my gaming group, and we've had a good time with it. The rules do need a little bit of work, but the creators of it have already put out an FAQ, and they're working on potentially getting an updated version of the rulebook out. And they're willing to answer any questions on their forums and whatnot. So they've been really proactive in taking care of a lot of the issues that have come up with the game. Other than that, the boards are pretty good. The miniatures are very well sculpted and put together. I would put them on par with pretty much any other board game that's out there besides ones that you actually have to put together. All the components and cards and artwork is all well done, so I definitely say that they definitely put a lot of time into the game. It had some interesting features to it. The survivors are going around and they have to achieve these certain objectives as they're going through these missions. On top of that, though, they have to weigh out whether or not they're going to go in guns blazing or stay back and stay hidden and stay in the shadows and avoid some of these creatures until the time is right, until they have the right weapons and they have the right situation where they can get in there and do the damage they need to do. On top of that, the creatures are nothing to sneeze at. They are very powerful, and especially initially in the game before you get weapons, most of them will just be able to wipe you out in a couple of turns. So you need to take your time and gear up before you end up facing some of these guys. On top of that, the game has some interesting mechanics that work with sound and other things that will have the creatures move in different ways and react to different situations, which is really neat. So I would definitely recommend checking out the game. I've had a good time with it myself, and I will be looking at making a gameplay video so you guys can see all that in action as well. So let's go ahead and head to the table, and I'll teach you guys how to play. Here are some of the different decks you'll be working with throughout the games. The first deck is the Resolve deck, and it is the purple background deck. At the top of each card is going to be the name of the card, the effects of the card, and at the bottom is going to be a number. At the beginning of the game, each player will be dealt 3 of these cards, which they will keep hidden except for the number. As they take the resolve checks and they fail them, when the resolve equals the number that is listed on the card, they will reveal the text on the card and resolve its effects. Next, we have the accomplishment deck, which is the green-backed deck. These cards, each player will receive one at the beginning of the game. They'll have the name of the card at the top. The text in the middle is the text that the player must meet those conditions. When they do, then they get the reward that is listed on the bottom of the card. Then we have the event deck, which has 6 different events in it. Radar token spawn, artificial gravity failure, lockdown, life support failure, anxiety, and blackout. Each one of these cards will have different conditions on it that when revealed you will resolve those conditions. Until you are familiar with these cards, as you can see on the side here, I would also recommend cross-referencing them with the rulebook, as some of the cards don't list all the effects that condition has for the round. The equipment deck is your blue-backed deck and will have a number of different items in it. You'll have single-use items, which is going to list the name of the item on the top, the artwork in the middle, and any effects that item has before it's discarded. Then we have helmet cards, which will list conditions that the helmet provides, armor cards, which will list the armor value and any other special conditions on that card, weapon cards, which are going to have 4 different icons on the bottom. You're going to have the range of that weapon, so if it just lists a 0, that is a melee weapon. If it lists 0 to another number, that is a ranged weapon. Then we have the target, which is the number of dice that you're going to roll when you attack with that weapon. Then the splatter mark, which is the number that you have to roll equal to or greater than on each dice to score a hit. And then finally, the amount of noise that weapon generates when it's fired. So for example, with the shotgun, we would roll 3 dice, and for each dice result that rolls a 3 or better, we score 1 successful hit on our target. Finally, we have noise cards, which when flipped will generate a number of noise, which you'll place a noise token in the space that you searched based on that number. There are 3 different types of dice included in the game. We have our standard D6 dice, which have pips from 1 to 6 on them. We have a directional dice, which anytime you have to randomize a direction, you roll this dice and it'll point in the direction you need to do whatever you're doing. If that is not a legal direction, you can rotate the dice 90 degrees in a clockwise manner, and then recheck until you find a legal direction. And then finally we have the damage dice, which anytime a survivor takes damage, then they will roll this dice to see if they take injury. The dice has a picture of a head, the body, and a set of legs on it, which are the 3 different zones a survivor can take an injury in, and it also has 3 blank sides to it. Each tile is broken down into a number of different sections. Each tile will contain 1 room, which is going to have walls on it, which are these dark lines, and each room is going to be broken into a number of sections, which are going to have separations so that you can move through one area to another, and then each tile will also have corridors that will line the outside. Each one of these corridors is going to be broken down into a number of spaces, which is separated by these little yellow and orange lines. And when placed together with other tiles, those areas will form single sections. So for example, with this area here, this is 1 section, and if we had 2 additional tiles there, that would extend all the way out to make a full square. Over here we have 1 section here and 1 section here as well. Player setup is very easy. Each player will choose a survivor's dashboard that they'd like to play as. On the top of each card is that survivor's role. Then we have the health track and the resolve track. Going along the edges of the board, we have the different areas where our survivors can dock items. So we have a slot for 1 piece of headgear, 1 piece of armor, and an inventory that can hold up to 3 items in it. Then we have the picture of the survivor and 3 circles, which are the 3 areas the survivor can take injuries in. When a survivor takes an injury in an area, you'll place an injury token in that area. A survivor can never receive more than 1 injury token in each area. And there will be penalties for those, which are referenced in the book. Then we have a section here for the survivor's ability token. Each survivor has their own unique ability token, which is going to list 3 different abilities. We have the passive ability, which when that survivor is activated, this ability will always be active. Then we have the active ability, which the survivor must spend 1 of their actions to activate for that turn, and this can be activated only 1 time per their turn. Finally, at the bottom of the card is the crisis ability, which can only be activated once during a game. Then each survivor will also receive 3 tokens. They have a crisis token, which when the crisis ability is used, that is discarded so that player cannot use that crisis anymore. And then we have a health token and a resolve token, which are both placed in the top corner of their grids. Then you can grab the survivor's miniature and clip on that color that corresponds to their dashboard. Finally, at the beginning of the game, each survivor will be randomly dealt 1 accomplishment card and 3 of the resolve cards, which you won't look at the text on the card, but you'll line up the bottom numbers in ascending order, and then I like to just put them right underneath our dashboard here. So as the survivors take resolve checks and fail them, when they reach the number of resolve on these cards, then they will reveal that card and resolve its effects. During board setup, you're going to go ahead and grab all of the radar tokens and break them into their individual groups. From there, you're going to consult the charts on the mission that you're playing, as you can see here on the side, and based on the number of survivors, you're going to take a number of radar tokens out of each pile equal to that value. So we're going to go ahead and set up for the first mission, and as you can see on this chart, we're going to play with 3 survivors, so we're going to get 4 swarmers. So we'll take the swarmer pile, mix them up, and choose 4 tokens out of that pile. We'll do the same for the Jigger tokens. Mix those up and take 3 out of that pile. The other 2 will be returned to the box, and the same for the Icarus. Mix them up, take 3, and the rest will be returned to the box. The Titan boss will not be used in this scenario, so he can be returned as well. And then we can just simply mix up these tokens and make a stack out of them. And we have our radar stack. Board setup is also very simple. At the beginning of the game, the players will choose a scenario that they'd like to play, and then you can go ahead and place out the board tiles as defined by that scenario. So we're going to go ahead and play the first scenario. So I've set out the tiles that we need, and then we can go ahead and place out all the tokens. So we have the door tokens, the objective marker, the starting point, and then finally you're going to go ahead and grab the radar tokens that you're going to need for it and randomly choose a number equal to what you need for a setup. So 1 will go here, 1 will go there, and 1 will go up here. From there, then you can place out all the rest of the radar tokens in a stack that you'll need for the game. Some of your noise counters and your damage tokens. Once all of our players are set up, then we can go ahead and deal out their starting cards. So go ahead and grab the accomplishment deck, shuffle it up, and deal each player 1 accomplishment card. And then the players can go ahead and look at those and place them anywhere they want. The rest of the deck can just go ahead and be removed from the game at this point, as you won't need it. Then grab the resolve deck, shuffle it up, and deal each player 3 resolve cards. The rest of the cards can be removed from the game. And then, like I talked about, each player will go ahead and flip these cards over, and not reading their text, will line them up underneath their board. Then before shuffling up the equipment deck, go ahead and remove 1 pistol, 1 plasma cutter, and a number of swarmer legs equal to the rest of the survivors, as each survivor will get 1 starting piece of equipment. So with us playing with 3 survivors, we'll have 1 pistol, 1 plasma cutter, and 1 swarmer leg. Shuffle those up and deal each survivor 1. So our medic has the plasma cutter, our marine has the pistol, and our captain has the swarmer leg. From there, then the rest of the item deck can be shuffled up and placed out on the board. Finally, the last thing we'll need to do is shuffle up our event deck and also check the special setup instructions on the mission, as some of the missions will have you remove cards. For example, with our first mission here that we're setting up for, you will go ahead and remove all the radar token spawn points of the tiles that we're not using. So each tile is going to have its own specific name, and so the tiles that we're not going to be using, we can go ahead and remove those from our event deck. From there, then we'll shuffle our event deck up and place that out on the playing area as well. Then we'll choose one of our survivors to be the starting survivor, so we'll give it to the captain. And then finally we can place all the miniatures in the starting space. From there, we're ready to start the game. Endure the Stars is played over a number of rounds, with each round broken into 3 phases: Survivor, Enemy, and Resolution phase. And we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at each one of these phases in depth. Before getting into the Survivor phase, I'd like to cover one important concept, which is resolve. Now, you must take a resolve test when certain conditions are met, which are each time a radar token is revealed in your line of sight, anytime a different type of enemy enters your line of sight, or if a card instructs you to do so. In order to make a resolve test, you're going to go ahead and roll 2d6 and total up the results. If the total is equal to or higher than your current resolve, then you have failed that resolve test and you will move your resolve down 1 point. Each survivor is going to start with 10 resolve, and from there it will be reduced. Another thing is when a survivor dies, any survivor in line of sight to that dying survivor will lose 2 resolve automatically. As we talked about earlier, each survivor has 3 resolve cards that have numbers on them. As that survivor loses resolve, if their current resolve is equal to one of the numbers or more on their cards, they must reveal that card and resolve its effects. If a survivor runs out of resolve, then each time that they are instructed to take a resolve test, they are going to lose 1 health instead. The first phase in each round is the survivor phase. During this phase, starting with the survivor that has the first player token, each survivor is going to perform 3 actions during their turn. They can use these actions to do a combination of any of the following, which is to move, attack, search, interact, activate ability, reorganize their inventory, trade, make noise, or combat. We're going to go ahead and take a look at each one of these abilities in depth. And on top of this, you can use your actions to perform any ability any number of times. So you can perform the same ability multiple times during your turn as long as you have the actions to do so. Movement for both survivors and enemies works the same way. Movement is always done orthogonally or in straight lines. Diagonal movement is not allowed, even from areas that look like you could move diagonally. So, for example, our captain here can spend 1 action to move from one space to an adjacent space. So she could move here, or if she was in here, she could move into that space up there, or move through this open door into that space there. Even though there's a little section here that looks like it could lead into this space, she's not allowed to do that, as she must never bypass a space completely and must move through the long edge of each section. So our captain here must move into this space first and spend an additional action to move into that space there. In order for a survivor to perform a search action, they must be in one of the sections of a room that contains no enemies. From there, they will spend 1 action to perform a search and take the top card of the item deck. They can add this card to their inventory and discard a card in their inventory to make room for this card for free. Now, a survivor is allowed to perform multiple searches during their turn, just not in the same section of a room. So our captain here could spend 1 action to move into this section and then perform another search action. Now with this one, we got a noise token, so she would add a noise token to that room, or that section of the room. Now again, if a monster or a enemy was in a section of a room, she can still search in this section, just not in the section that the enemy is actually in. From there, survivors are also not allowed to search in any of the outer corridors or hallways that they're in, only in the sections of the rooms that contain no enemies. A survivor can spend 1 action point to activate their active ability or their crisis ability as long as they have not spent their crisis token yet. The active ability can only be activated once per turn, and the crisis ability can only be activated once per game. A survivor could also spend 2 points to activate both of those abilities in the same turn, 1 point for each ability. A survivor can also spend 1 action point to reorganize their inventory, which will allow them to move their items around. So, for example, with our medic here, he has a piece of headgear that's equipped, but he figures that the sharpshooter headgear is going to be more effective in the coming turns. So he's going to spend 1 of his action points to rearrange his inventory and switch out those 2 pieces of headgear. So now that the sharpshooter one is going to be equipped. Survivors can also spend one action to perform a trade with another survivor that's in the same space as them. When they do this, the survivors can exchange any number of items, weapons, mission objectives with one other survivor in their space. From there, both survivors are allowed to perform a reorganize of their inventory for free. This action cannot be performed if there are any enemies in the same space. A survivor can also make noise as an action. In order to do this, the survivor will choose a number of actions that they would like to spend to make noise. Each action they spend will increase the noise level by 1 point. So, for example, with our captain here, if she wants to make some noise and she chooses to spend 2 of her actions to do so, she will place a noise token in her space equal to that number. So we placed a noise token 2 value in there. The last kind of action a survivor can perform is an attack action. And there are 2 different types of attacks. There's melee attacks and ranged attacks. And we're going to take a look at examples of both of those. So the first kind of attack we're going to look at is a ranged attack. And in order to make a ranged attack, you must have line of sight to the target zone that you wish to fire on. And you must have range to it. So we're going to go ahead and say that our Marine here is going to perform a ranged attack. And he has a couple of different targets. You have enemies coming from 3 different spaces that he can choose from. So the first thing we're going to do is determine if he has line of sight. So first off, he has line of sight to this space here, as there is nothing blocking his line of sight. He does not have line of sight to this space back here with the swarmer, as the enemies here are going to block his line of sight to that enemy. And finally, over here, if he shoots at this enemy back here, he has line of sight because he can fire through friendly models. The one problem with that, though, is any dice that he rolls misses on when he rolls to hit the enemy here are going to be taken by the survivors. Now that we've determined our Marine's line of sight, we're going to go ahead and choose one of his ranged weapons that has range to his target zone. So he's going to go ahead and use the assault rifle, and as you guys can see here, it has a range of 0 to 2. So he can hit this zone, and you're always going to fire into a zone, and then when any successes you have can be distributed against any of the models in the zone. So our assault rifle gives our Marine 4 dice. He's going to go ahead and roll those, and for each roll of a 4 or better, he's going to score 1 hit. And so he rolled 2 6s, a 5, and a 4, which will score 4 successful hits. So he could choose to distribute 1 to each enemy, but it's an all or nothing thing. So if he'd only do 1 damage to each enemy, that would not be enough to kill them, and so there's no way to track the wounds, and so when he rolled his next attack, none of those would count. So we're going to go ahead and pair it up and do 2 damage to this enemy here, and 2 damage to that enemy there, as they have 2 wounds apiece. And so he has eliminated those 2 and going to go ahead and fire again. And this time he rolled 3 successes and 1 failure, so he's going to go ahead and kill 1 more enemy, and the last wound will simply just be wasted. The last thing we need to do after we've resolved our attack is to drop a noise token in the space that we're in based on the weapon that we used. So with our Marine that used an assault rifle, it makes a noise of 3. So we'll drop a 3 in there. Now this is not cumulative, so each time he fired the assault rifle in this turn, so if he fired it multiple times, this would not stack, meaning that you would not add another 3 token to it. It would simply be whatever the highest noise token in the space is. So if he used another weapon that generated 4 noise, he would drop a 4 noise token in there and remove the 3. Now let's go ahead and take a look at one other example. Let's go ahead and say that the Marine here is going to go ahead and fire on this enemy over here. He's firing through 2 survivors, so any misses will hit the survivors. So we'll go ahead and roll the dice as normal. He rolled 3 hits, which will hit the enemy, and 1 miss, which will be distributed between one of the survivors. When there's more than 1 survivor, each survivor will roll a dice, and the survivor that has the lowest result will be the survivor that will take the damage. That survivor is allowed to take an armor save as normal. If the survivor passes the armor save, then all is well and no damage is dealt. If the survivor fails their armor save or has no armor, then it will take a number of damage based on the amount of misses that are rolled. You wouldn't roll for each individual dice. You would just roll for 1 time and resolve the damage. So since there was only 1 dice that missed, then our captain would only take 1 damage. But say, for example, our Marine had rolled 4 misses, then the captain would have taken 4 damage. The other type of attack a survivor can perform is a melee attack. So our Marine here is going to go ahead and perform a melee attack. So you have to be in the same space as your enemies, and then you would choose one of your weapons that is a melee weapon to perform that attack. So the Marine happens to have a pair of plasma cutters, which can be dual wielded, which means that you get to use both of the weapons for one action. So with the plasma cutters, as you guys can see, they each will get 2 dice. So our Marine gets to throw 4 dice, and he's going to be looking for 4s or better. So he happens to roll 2 hits and 2 misses. So the 2 hits will be enough to kill our enemy because they have 2 health apiece. And the 2 misses will simply be disregarded, as melee weapons get to choose their target and any misses are not distributed to any survivors that are in the space. From there, after the attack is resolved, then we have to drop a noise token in there based on the weapon that's used. So the plasma cutter generates 2 noise. That is not doubled because it is dual wielded. It's a single weapon or a single attack, so it's only going to generate 2 noise. The enemy phase is conducted in a specific order, with the enemies first moving if not already in a space with a survivor, and then performing an attack if able. So first, enemies exist in 2 states, either a passive or active. With a passive state, if a radar token or enemy has not been alerted by noise or seen a survivor, it will wander the map in a random direction. For each model or radar token, roll a directional dice and move 1 space in the given direction. The other kind of state enemies can be in is an active state, which means that something got the enemy or token's attention. An active radar token always is going to move 2 zones, and figures are going to be moved determined by the enemy type. Enemies have a priority list that denotes what draws their attention from most to least, which is distracting items, then seeing a survivor, and finally hearing noise. Now let's go ahead and take a look at an example of this. So here we have a couple of different enemies out and a radar token. And we also have a noise token that's gotten the attention of all of the models that are within 1 space of it, which would be any space that's adjacent to it. So this corridor over here, that space, this space with the radar token, and then this space with the 2 enemies in it. So that means that both the radar token and our enemies over here are active. Our little swarmer up here is not going to be active because he is more than 1 space away from the noise token, and so he is going to be passive. So the first thing we'll do is we'll take care of the passive guy up there, and so we're going to roll the directional dice to see which direction he can go, which he can only go forward or back, as there's a wall blocking here and there's nothing over here. So he rolled his directional dice in that direction. Now, if he would have rolled it in this direction, then we would have rotated it 90 degrees in a clockwise order until one of the directions that it points is an open direction. But since he is going to go up there, he'll just move 1 space in that direction. And then we'll take care of our active guys as well. So for radar tokens, they will move 2 spaces to get to the source that has attracted their attention. Now, once they moved in here, if there was, say, a survivor up here, they could draw a line of sight to, which anytime you have an opening into another area, anywhere in here would be considered to be able to draw a line of sight into there. In which case, at that point, then they would move into that area and be revealed. Now, with our guys over here, again, they would move into here, but we're going to use their movement value as their action. So our guys here have 2 actions, so they're going to spend that first one to move into there. And then again, if they would be able to see a survivor from that point, then they would continue on. Otherwise, they're going to stop in that area. Now, the one other thing when dealing with groups of passive enemies, so let's go ahead and say that these guys down here didn't have the noise token, and so they were in a passive state. In a situation where you have multiple models of the same type, you can just roll the directional dice 1 time to determine where all the models in that space will move. The second part of the enemy phase is combat. The enemies will get to perform 1 combat action no matter how many actions they have remaining. So over here in our second example, we have 2 enemies that are in our space with our captain. So each one of them will get to perform an attack against our captain, which automatically gets hit. If our captain has any armor on, she can roll armor saves, one armor save per enemy. If she fails the armor save, then she will take the total amount of damage that each enemy does based on their profile. So with our guys here, each one of them is going to do 2 damage, and so she can make one armor check against that. If she fails, then she'll take the 2 damage, not that she would roll an armor save per damage done. So our captain does not have any armor, so she will take 4 damage, 2 from each of our enemies. And then for each damage that she takes, she will also roll the injury dice. And this again is per attack, so she would roll it 2 times and not based on each individual point of damage. If there are multiple survivors in that zone, then for each enemy that attacks, the survivors will each roll a dice, and the survivor that rolls the lowest result will be the survivor that takes the hit. That survivor can always roll armor as usual. If they fail the armor, then again they would take the damage and have to roll the injury dice. The last phase in a round is the resolution phase, and there's a certain order that the players are going to follow during this phase. So the first thing is the players are going to remove any exhausted or non-relevant tokens and cards, so we can remove our noise tokens at this point. From there, then, you can go ahead and flip over the top card of the event deck and follow its instructions. So we have a radar token spawn in the armory. So our armory is over here, and so we're going to go ahead and put noise tokens in there from 1 to 4 so that we can randomize where our new radar token is going to go. So it'll go into the first slot, so we'll drop the radar token in there, and then you can remove those noise tokens again. Now, if the event card has effects on it, those effects are going to last until the beginning of the next resolution phase, when that card is going to be discarded and a new event card is drawn. The first player token is going to pass to the next player in clockwise order, so our Marine will be the next player to start, and then we're ready to start a new round. Now there's a couple other effects I'd like to cover real quick. So the first of these is stun. When a model is stunned, you're going to lay the model on its side, and each model is going to work a little bit differently. For stunned survivor, if the survivor is stunned during the survivor's phase, it's going to lose all of its remaining actions that it hadn't done yet for that round. This is going to last until the next survivor round. And if stunned during the enemy or resolution phase, the survivor is going to lose 1 action during its next survivor phase. With a stunned enemy, if the enemy is stunned during the survivor phase, then the enemy is going to be incapacitated for the rest of the game round. It may not act in any way until they activate again in the following game round's enemy phase. Now let's take a closer look at how the radar tokens work. So our Marine over here is going to move 1 space, and now he is in line of sight of the radar token. So the first thing he's going to do is take a resolve test, and he passed it, so all is well there. Then the token is going to get flipped over, and the enemies are going to be placed out. Now before we do that, we have to check and see if a Solomon is spawned with them. So we're going to roll 2 dice, and then checking the chart based on the number of survivors that are playing. If we roll those results, then a Solomon is going to be spawned. So with 3 players, if a 1 or 2 is rolled, then the Solomon will spawn, so we're okay there. As we rolled a 6, and then we're going to drop the rest of the enemies in there. So we have 5. Now for our second example, let's go ahead and say that our survivors had generated a bunch of noise, which would cause our radar token to be active. And so if the radar token moved during its movement phase into line of sight with the survivors, then it's going to go ahead and reveal again, and we would follow the same steps. Each of the survivors that draws line of sight to it would have to take a resolve check, and then we're going to go ahead and spawn the enemies. Now with the enemies being in this small area, if there are more enemies than can fit in the area, then the rest of the enemies are going to be spawned in the adjacent areas, which will be randomized by the directional dice. And so our last enemy will go in here. If there are ever any, the space is completely filled with models where no models can move in, then that space is considered impassable until room opens up. Exo-loaders are only available in certain missions and can be piloted by any survivor, but they do require a power cell to function. Each power cell will allow the loader to run for 2 turns. The survivor must spend at least one action to enter the loader, and any remaining actions that survivor has are lost for that round. If the survivor does not have any power cells, then they can exit the loader for one action. If the survivor does have a power cell, they're going to turn the card 90 degrees for the first turn to show that they have used the cell halfway. During the second turn, they're going to turn the card upside down to show that this is the last turn that they can use it. Then that card is going to be discarded. Now, when a survivor is piloting the loader that has power, that loader is going to give the survivor 4 actions per turn. In combat, the loader has its own set of stats, as you guys can see here. A survivor is not allowed to use any equipped weapons that it might have, and it will not be able to use any armor that it has as well, as the loader will provide a 2+ armor save as long as it has power. Now, there's a couple other special rules. A survivor is not allowed to perform a search or trade action while in the loader. It cannot use any items from its inventory. It cannot use active or crisis abilities while in the loader. It can use the abilities granted from any bonuses that its helmet gives. And you don't need to take a resolve check to leave a zone with enemies. You will still need to take resolve tests, though, when you draw line of sight to new enemies. The one item I would like to cover real quick, a little bit more in depth, is the Void Cannon, as this is listed in the FAQ. But if you happen not to see the FAQ, this particular item can be a game breaker. So the way that this weapon is intended to work is that in order to fire it, you must have a power cell in your inventory. And you can only fire it once per power cell that you have. Once you use it, then the power cell will be discarded, and the Void Cannon will not be able to be fired. Now, the base game comes with one boss, the Titan. There will be additional bosses available later on, and the boss works a little bit differently. The first time the boss is revealed, any survivor within its line of sight is going to lose 1 resolve. Some missions will have you place the boss radar token in the pile and be mixed up with them and be drawn randomly. In other missions, the boss will be spawned at the end. The boss is so powerful that he has his own deck of cards that are going to dictate how he performs his turn. The deck is comprised of 2 different types of cards. You have Titan attack cards, which basically will allow the Titan to attack in certain manners. And then you have the Titan mood cards, which will change certain conditions on the Titan, whether it improves his stats or gives him additional bonuses. Only one mood card can be in play at any time, and when a new mood card is drawn, then you would discard the old one. Now, the Titan also has his own dashboard, which has a health track, which the mission will tell you how much health the Titan has. He may not have the full 30 points of health. And then you have a slot for his attack card. During the boss's turn, the boss can exist in 2 phases just like any other model, of the passive phase or the active phase. In the passive phase, he works just like the other models. And in the active phase, you're going to draw a card from the boss deck. If it is a mood card, it will be put in play, and then you would draw another card so that the boss can attack. You're going to continue doing this until the boss draws at least 1 attack card. When he draws an attack card, if there is a target in range, the boss will perform the attack. If not, then the boss will attempt to use its actions to move within range of the target so it can perform its attack. Now, the other way you can play Endure the Stars is in a campaign mode, which means that there's going to be a number of missions that are going to be chained together to tell an overall story arc. So the cool thing with this is that from mission to mission, the survivors are not going to heal back up to their full health resolve, and they are going to retain any injuries they have. But between each mission, the survivors can visit the refuge, which is going to let them potentially heal back up and regain resolve and maybe heal injuries. So to set the refuge up, you'll place this in the middle of the board, shuffle up the refuge event deck, and place it to one side, and then draw the top 3 cards from your item deck and place them in the trading post. If you have any noise cards come up, those are just discarded and another card is drawn until you have 3 items. From there, Then you want to place a token, doesn't matter what, on the 0 slot to count the number of turns the survivors are in that zone. And then from there, you can use your survivor models and move them into one of the 4 different areas, which is loved ones, quarters, infirmary, or the trading post. And they are able to do the actions that are listed in that section. So let's go ahead and say that our medic here was hurting pretty bad, but he didn't want to have to roll on any of the charts, so he's going to go here and choose this to heal to resolve. Our captain, on the other hand, wants to go to the infirmary, so she's going to roll 2 dice and consult the chart. She rolled an 8, so she'll follow the guidelines there, so she'll heal 2 health. And our marine would like to go and visit his family, so again, he's going to roll on the chart. He didn't roll so well, so he's just making it by and nothing happens. From here, then the survivors have a choice. They can either go on to the next mission, or they can continue in the refuge, but when they do that, there is a risk that something bad can happen. So they're going to flip over the top card of the refuge deck and follow the instructions on it. So this one is a good one, and all survivors are going to gain 1 health. And then you're going to mark the token to the next spot. The survivors can only spend 5 turns in the refuge. From here, then the survivors would gain 1 action again, and so they can do whatever they want, again in one of the 4 sections. So I hope that gives you guys a good idea of how the game runs and functions. As always, if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. And if you like what I do, please think about hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel, as every little bit helps me grow and helps bring new games to you guys by my channel. So if you like my channel, you like what I'm doing, please consider hitting those buttons. And as always, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch my videos and leaving me comments about what you think about them, how I can improve them, or if there's things that I've done wrong with them. So again, thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.